All right, welcome everybody to the meeting of the Social Science Subcommittee for the Tampa Bay Estuary Program. We have a good slate of presenters today that are focused on community related to anything going on with the Tampa Bay Estuary area. There's three presenters. I'm going to give them is 30 minutes each okay, Blake, or would you, to save some room for discussion at the very end?
Yeah, I think that
That's
works. Yeah, we should have, the last sort of meeting was sort of jam-packed. So we tried to reduce a little bit so that we can have a bit more flexibility, more time, and also more sort of group discussion and updates at the end. So yeah, 30 minutes should be good, I think.
Sounds good. So I will let you get started. The first is Blake presenting. He's got a feedback request for the Tampa Bay Estuary Program's community survey that's being put together. So he will give us an overview of that and then provide additional details on the request for feedback.
Awesome. Thanks. Let's see. Let's share here. Hopefully you are seeing. Yeah, so I'm going to talk today about the Tampa Bay Community Survey. Also, just a quick plug. We do have our Bay Mini Grants are now accepting proposals. So those are small 1 year long grant projects that involve people from the community or really sort of, just focus on environmental restoration and education in the Tampa Bay area. Rewards go up to about $5,000. So relatively small projects, but if there's little things that you'd like some extra funding for, especially sort of on-ground restoration or education efforts, feel free to submit a proposal. Those will close around mid August, or I think early September, actually. So there's still a bit of time. So feel free to check that out. And today, as Krista said, sort of I want to kind of get some feedback from folks. We do have a little Tampa Bay Community Survey Working Group of social science subcommittee members that have already gave a lot of input on this, but wanted to open this up to everyone for some more general feedback now that we kind of have a near final version to work from. And just to give some sort of background, the Tampa Bay Estuary Program, we are guided by our Comprehensive Conservation and Management Plan. And within our CCMP, we do have several goals that are relevant to social and behavioral data in the Bay. And so it'd be really great for us to be able to track progress on those sort of key actions that we have in our CCMP. And hopefully the Tampa Bay Community Survey will be a way for us to be able to measure some progress on these. And so here you can just see some of those that are relevant. It's a lot of things about public education and involvement in restoration and protection, uh, public access, managing those recreational uses and behaviors of people in the Bay, making sure that we address, climate change issues and adaptation, mitigation behaviors. Also, in terms of thinking about those behaviors, what can we do to track, the reduction of nitrogen that runs off from urban landscapes, increasing the adoption of green infrastructure practices, reducing propeller scars leading to seagrass loss, and also, thinking about the importance of biodiversity and the values that people have around biodiversity in the Bay. So the Tampa Bay Community Survey, this is going to be a long-term survey to monitor the social and cultural changes over time in the Bay Area to help us achieve those CCMP goals. Um, in terms of sample size, so every 2 years, we're expecting to run this survey, and we're aiming for at least 1,000 residents throughout our watershed will be included. We have gotten really good quotes from audience panels online up to 1,000, but we are probably going to also supplement those online versions of the survey with mail out surveys to some of those more underserved and overburdened communities that likely are going to be underrepresented in that kind of online sample. So it'll probably end up being around 1,200, 1,300 residents in total. And we're hoping that we can launch this between July and August of this year, because we have, a lot of environmental questions, a lot of questions about climate change and flooding and things like that, wanting to sort of get in ahead of hurricane season, storm season, where it might be more top of mind for folks. So we don't bias them too much. And this is sort of a layout of what it is that we want to be able to track in the Tampa Bay Community Survey. So we want to understand what it is that they know, what is their level of knowledge about the Bay across sort of different key messages that the estuary program puts out there. We want to know what they think about environmental issues, what they think about things like environmental justice in their community, how they feel. So how connected are they to nature? Things like place identity, solastalgia, eco-anxiety, and their overall health and well-being and safety in the environment. Also want to be able to track what it is that they want. So what are their priorities? And not just priorities for the environment, but being able to understand where the environment sits with other priorities, priorities about the economy, infrastructure, social services, those sorts of things. And then, of course, we want to be able to track behaviors. So what it is that they're doing in the Bay. So how much they're engaging with nature in different types of ways, social degree of social capital, here, social engagement measure, and different sort of pro-environmental behaviors that they might be doing. And all that comes out to this. This is the paper version of the current survey. It's estimated to take about 18 to 20 minutes to be able to complete, so not too long, but it definitely is, a lot of stuff that we have in there. And that's just the sort of general layout. The online version will be done through Qualtrics, which is what most people will take. But so I'm just going to go through very quickly the types of content that the survey has. And, feel free if you have any burning questions or comments while I'm going through, please feel free to raise your hand so that I can see you and just kind of interject whenever you want, or, we can save comments and questions. But so this first question is really just setting the stage, making sure that we know that the people who take this survey are within the Tampa Bay area. This shouldn't be a problem. The company that we're hiring is going to have the zip codes that qualify for within our boundaries, and they say that they have to live there. But just to be sure, we'll do some checks to see, where it is that they live, the type of home that they have, because that may influence, some behaviors that they might be able to do. If you live in an apartment complex, you don't really have control over fertilizing your lawn or gardening or things like that, right? So get an idea of that stuff, whether they rent or own their property, how long they've lived in the Bay Area. We know that, some perceptions and attitudes may differ depending on how long people have lived here. And then we also have, to get us some spatial information, we ask them what the zip code of their residence is. Usually most people will answer this and feel comfortable. But we do also have this more detailed question here that I like to use in surveys, which asks them what the nearest street intersection is to their property. And usually this has, about 2/3 of people will usually answer this question because, it does give an extra degree of resolution to their location, but still keeps it anonymous, right? Unless you're living in a really rural area where you're the only person near that street intersection, most people generally understand that, we can't still identify them from that, sort of cross street level information. And this has been really helpful in past surveys that I've done. Here's an example from one that I did in Melbourne, Australia, where you can see sort of this top one is what the map of survey respondents looks like whenever you just ask people about their zip code. But whenever you add this additional detail, you can actually see all of these little dots here are the street intersections that people said. So you can really get some high resolution spatial information out of it and then do some cool interpolations and things like that from them. So that's kind of the goal for this, is to be able to really pinpoint some of the key things that we're looking for within different neighborhoods of Tampa Bay. And then the first thing that we ask them in terms of those other topics is their priorities. So here we've got an opportunity for them to sort of rank how much of a priority each of these different potential priorities could be for their own community. And I won't go through all of them, but basically, you've got environmental priorities like better access to nature and public places, reducing outdoor trash, air quality and water quality improvements. But it's also situated next to things like social services, education, affordable health and emergency services, income, low-income housing, public transport improvements, infrastructure things, roads, bridges, utilities, flood protection infrastructure, as well as economic priorities. So job availability, wages, cost of living, those types of things. So the idea is for us to sort of, be able to get a good sort of baseline benchmark of where environmental priorities are situated alongside all these other concerns that folks might have. We also want to know, getting about, what it is that people think. And so we have some questions, just general sort of Likert scale questions that to gauge different dimensions of environmental justice. So whether they think, their community is more burdened by environmental problems than other communities, if they think they actually have agency or a say in decisions that affect their community, those sorts of things. Some specific environmental attitudes that we're interested in is, do they actually link what happens in their community to what happens in the Bay? If they think the Bay is important, even if they may never encounter it. The people who live, further inland, up in Plant City, Lakeland, those sorts of places, is the Bay still important to them, even if they don't get to interact with it? Attitudes about biodiversity and how satisfied they are with opportunities to engage in outdoor activities. And then we have here what's called the nature relatedness scale. And so this basically measures people's connection to nature. And generally it's a composite score that we put together that basically has a high correlation with, people that are, environmentally friendly and that are connected to nature. And, that has a lot of uh, spillover effects basically into behaviors and other attitudes that they have. So we want to be able to track that over time as well. And then thinking about their behaviors, what it is that they're doing. We have different types of activities that they can say how frequently they do these in the last 12 months. And we have activities here that I call active nature engagement. So these are activities that people do where nature is essential. It's the number one sort of thing that they're interacting with. And so that's, camping, paddling, swimming, bird watching, fishing, those sorts of things. But you also have what I call passive nature engagement. So these are things that you can actually do without engaging in nature. So exercising, reading, relaxing, or cooking. But in this context, they are in natural spaces. So calling this a bit more passive nature engagement, where nature isn't the forefront of these particular behaviors. Other things like attractions, so specific sites that people are interested in and how often they go to them. And then we have some key pro-environmental behaviors that we have here, or sort of anti-environmental behaviors in some cases. And so these are really tied to some of the big things that our behavior change campaigns focus on and that we think have a disproportionate effect on the environment. So being able to track, people that fertilize their lawn, how often they water their lawn, whether they blow grass clippings or leaves into the street, if they have a rain barrel, rain garden, or swale at their home, so getting into that green infrastructure bit. And then comparing those sort of key behaviors for our Bay Area with other just sort of general household environmental behaviors, like, choosing not to drive, to have other means of transport, recycling. And then we have some other more active types of restoration types of things. So planting or maintaining native or Florida-friendly plants, and then actually participating in restoration of habitats. And for the people that answer, those questions about those behaviors, we also want to gauge where they think they sit in terms of the rest of their peers. So looking at descriptive norms and so saying, okay, based off of, the answers that you gave to each of these sort of behaviors, do you think that's the norm? Do you think more people do this behavior more often than you or less often than you? Whether or not that is the case, getting a gauge on where people think that they sit relative to the rest of the people in their community will be really helpful. And then there are a few additional questions based off of what it is that people said that they tend to do that can give us more nuanced data. So for the people that say that they do fertilize at some point in the year, we want to check to see when it is that they fertilize, right? So most of you might know that summer is the period where in Tampa Bay there's an ordinance to, prevent people from fertilizing during the rainy season. So we want to actually see, if people are fertilizing a lot, are they at least doing it outside of this sort of critical time of year? And then also some questions about fishing characteristics. So if they said that they go fishing in the year, we want to know where they typically fish from. So a few different locations that they can go. They can select all that apply. And then what the reason they're fishing for is. So whether that's for fun, to relax, if they're getting food for themselves or for others, or just kind of having more fun, just spending time with friends or family, or just socializing with other anglers. So a few items that get it a bit more nuanced into what it is that people do. Our measure of social capital, here we are explicitly looking at social engagement measure. So it's really just how often people are sort of active in different types of social groups. And there's a bunch of sort of different options here that people have, homeowner associations, political groups. And what we can do, there's a lot of different ways that we can analyze this, but another sort of key thing we can do is sort of benchmark people that are involved in environmental protection or animal welfare compared to all of these other supplemental types of organizations like those priorities to get a gauge of the baseline involvement that people have specifically with environmental types of groups. And then we have a few other things when we think about how people feel. So, we think that place identity, a part of place attachment, is very important to getting people to care about Tampa Bay and environmental protection in the Bay. So we have 3 items here that measure place identity. So how much they identify with the Bay, how special it is to them, and how attached they are to it. Other items, solastalgia. So this is sort of the way that I like to kind of describe solastalgia is the sense of being homesick without actually leaving your home. So it's this idea that, you're nostalgic for what things used to be like in the past. And so here we have questions to sort of gauge, how they feel about the changes that they've encountered in the Bay. That we have a lot of anecdotal evidence that people do long for, the less sort of hustle and bustle that, Tampa Bay used to be, or that, there were, you know, groves that they could walk to, and now they've all been paved over, and it's, it's all concrete and things like that. So being able to track, that solastalgia in folks across the Bay over time. And then also we have a measure here of hope, specifically hope pathways. And so that helps us think about, whenever we think about people's sort of sense of agency and their willingness and ability to take action on things like climate change and things like that, that hope is a really important component to driving those actions. And so wanting to gauge how generally how hopeful they sort of feel, if they can think of a lot of ways to fix environmental problems, if they know what they can do to help the environment, those sorts of things. And at least for the estuary program, hope is a big key component of our messages. We don't just want doom and gloom all the time. We want people to feel hopeful and that there is something that they can do about these tough issues out there. We also want to know about their general safety and well-being. So we have several questions here that encompass, how safe they feel outdoors, if they feel like they belong in outdoor situations. There's a lot of misconceptions about how safe the bay is to swim in, and so we'd like to be able to track that and see what people think about the bay. And then we have some other questions that sort of gauge how much, changes in wildlife and climate affect their lifestyle. So how directly that those sorts of environmental changes affect their life, as well as cultural changes here, so historic neighborhoods and archaeological site changes. We want to gauge, if they view climate change as a major threat to the people in their community. And then we also have a general sort of life satisfaction um, type of goal. And this is usually sort of highly correlated with, things of hope and other sorts of things like that. So that'll be really interesting for us to investigate. Getting into sort of more of the mental health space. So uh, eco-anxiety is a relatively new concept, sort of emerged around 2019 or so, along with things like ecological grief. And so here we have a measure, it's actually taken from the general anxiety disorder 7-item question that is used in the DSM-5. And it's been tweaked to sort of add an environmental component. So typically you say over the last 2 weeks, how often have you been bothered by the following problems? And then we sort of add in this little, addition, specifically thinking about changes to the environment. And so, there's psychological measures of, the scores that these all sum to. But basically then we can get a general idea of sort of, if folks have a mild, moderate, or severe case of potential eco-anxiety. And so this will be a relatively novel contribution to the literature that hopefully will be very exciting, and we'll get an opportunity to see where eco-anxiety kind of fits into the mix of other drivers of behavior. And then the last thing that we ask them, this is about what they know. So we ask them sort of little test questions to gauge their knowledge on different sort of key messages that we try to put out there as an estuary program. And so these are just sort of, questions that ask them about their knowledge of water quality trends, the importance of nitrogen, stormwater runoff being a major driver, and a bunch of other different questions. And then for each one of them, because some people may have no idea, and if they have no idea, we still want them to guess, but we want to know if they are guessing just completely out of the blue or if they actually think they know. So for each question, they'll indicate how confident they are in their answer. And so that'll give us a gauge on what it is that people know and how confident they feel about the answers that they give, as well as where they get their information about the state of the environment. And for the people that take this online, we can actually show them their score. So they can indicate if they want to see what their scores were at the end of the survey. And if they do, they get a little tailored message, saying, good job, or even if you did terrible, that's okay. We don't expect you to do well. And then they get a description of the correct answers and why that's the correct answer, and the importance of that particular topic. So hopefully, folks will be interested in finding out their score and learning a little bit about the answer. And then last, we will, of course, ask them some general demographic stuff at the end: age, gender, race, ethnicity, education, income, as well as their political viewpoints. And did just want to add that I'm not completely sold on this idea. I'm open to sort of feedback from the group, but generally sort of thinking about, we do have, for each zip code, we do have census data about the proportion of residents in these age groups and of, male and female genders. And so, if we are wanting to make sure that the sample that we get of responses is reflective of the actual representation of residents in the watershed, we can do population weighting. So basically the formula is just, the target proportion of people for each zip code, gender, and age group divided by what it is that you actually got in your sample. And so then that'll sort of allow for overrepresented folks to be given less weight in favor of adding extra weight to the people that should be more represented but aren't in the survey. But open to ideas on that. It makes things a little bit muddier. But I think, for whenever we try to say things that are representative of the actual entire community in the area, I think it might be a good strategy. But yeah, so that was a lot. There's a lot in this survey. And so, I've gotten some great feedback from a lot of the social science subcommittee members that have given, recommendations and comments. And hopefully you all sort of saw some of the requests implemented in here. But yeah, wanted to open it up to everybody else to see sort of if you have any comments, ideas, suggestions, questions, or things like that to help us improve this survey. So I'll open it up all to you. There might be folks in the chat. I'll check, but
Blake, you have two sets of questions in the chat. We can invite them to come off mute and ask them, or we can just read them from the chat, your preference.
yeah, if folks are able to come off and hop on, turn themselves off mute, that would be awesome.
Hi, yeah, I put in a couple of questions there. Are you targeting the Bay proper, or is this intended to gather responses from the entire region? And then that will kind of lead to my second question.
Yep, so this is just going to be, it's going to be within our sort of delineated watershed. We are doing it by zip code though, and so there are going to be zip codes that sort of expand outside of these, specific delineated boundaries. But like if, a place like, Bayonet Point, Hudson, those sorts of places where the zip codes are clearly outside of our boundaries, they won't be included. So it's just any zip code that is overlapping with our boundary.
Gotcha.
Blake, can I ask a related question to that one? In several of the questions I saw that you're directing the respondent to think about their community. And did we define that at the beginning for them, like what we wanted them to think of as their community? Is it the zip code if we're delineating them by zip code, or is it their own sense of community?
That's a good question, and I intentionally left it kind of vague because I was interested in allowing people to think about community however they might define it. So, whether they think about community being like a geographic, you know, my, sort of block is my community, but I also thought it might be good to have, some people, especially if we think about Black or Latino or Vietnamese populations, maybe they would interpret this as, their Vietnamese community, their fellow Black community. That does introduce some error, right? Because it is up to interpretation. So I don't know, do folks think that we should at least define that more specifically? And if we should define it, should it be like, more geographic spatial, or should it be more sort of identity focused in definition? I don't know. What do folks think? I need to find the chat.
I ask, can you ask them what they think? How they define their community? Would that fit within this? Instead of predetermining or giving a definition, you can ask what they consider their community. Or maybe they have more than one community they feel they're a part of.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, we could do that.
Do you have anything in there that would distinguish whether they recognize how much they feel like they influence the Bay? Because some of those areas are well inland, and I don't know what people would say, but some of them may not feel like they have any connection to it.
Yeah, so we have this Bay linkage question that isn't necessarily a personal one where like their personal impact on the Bay, but it does change gauges like, changes in my community's landscape will not have a significant impact on the health of the bay. So yeah, so that one's kind of more community focused, but not necessarily individual sense of connection. Do you think that do you think it would be better to include an option like that where it is a more personal connection to what they do and the health of the bay, or do you think that this sort of phrasing here kind of gets at that enough of what you're kind of thinking?
Well, I was just thinking in terms of the community question, whether they were identifying themselves as even having any connection to the bay at all. But if you're teasing out what their community means in some way, I think between that and this question, it probably covers that.
Okay.
Okay, and Blake, there was in the chat box some questions from John Harrod, and he says if they're already answered, he's happy to go back and watch the recording. But just wanted to clarify how the survey is conducted.
Oh yeah, I see it. Yep. So
Yep.
the survey, yeah, it's done. We have two modes, so it's going to be done online for the majority of people, for at least 1,000 folks. It'll just be an online through Qualtrics, and then we'll also supplement that with some mail out versions of the survey that we can direct specifically towards underserved and overburdened communities that we know are likely not going to be represented in an online panel. So to make sure that we still get their input in there. I also see it's a lot of questions, a lot of rows per question. Yes. What's the completion rate for those who start the survey? So we don't have any tests of, completion rates from test audiences yet. The company that we're hiring, they do quote us based off of completions. So we are guaranteed completions, but we are going to look for, indicators of dissent or acquiescence bias, or, just people, eventually kind of giving up and, just selecting, things that just don't make sense or that are all the same sort of thing. So we will have a guaranteed sample of people who complete it for the dollars that we spend, and we'll also do a little bit of vetting to make sure that there's quality responses. And I don't believe that we aren't providing an incentive to complete the survey, but I think most of the companies we've talked to, they're one of the companies that, have a pool of people that sign up and then they get points for surveys that they take. And so there's an incentive that like, hey, if you take more surveys, eventually you'll get points for, I don't know what it is that they give people, but at some point it becomes some kind of gift or monetary thing. I imagine that's sort of an incentive provided by those companies. Noelle, I agree with Heather. It would be interesting to ask people what they consider to be their community in terms of spatial extent and or other identifiers. Yep. Trying to think, if we left that open-ended, it might be a bit difficult. But if people have ideas of like options to give for people to select, and they can select all that apply, maybe. Yeah. Kai, hi. Your hand raised.
Yeah, hey, thank you. Really interesting survey. I'm glad I got to see that. I have a couple of nitty-gritty comments. I mean, I think on the fisheries-related parts of the survey, and in particular, I think we have some fairly well defined and grounded scales in fisheries that we use to characterize fishing motivations and so on. And I think it might be useful to use some of those. So for the where you have there's the fishing characteristics, so fishing for fun or sport, relaxation, own food. So there, I think if that's okay with you, I would review those a little and see whether we can maybe align them a bit more closely with the sort of scales that we tend to use. I think that they're good. I mean, there's nothing wrong with them. I just think if you align them more, it also connects it more with some of the other surveys that we typically do.
Yeah,
And I'll do that offline. I don't want to do that right here. But I have one other question actually about this bit where you test people's scientific knowledge or knowledge about the bay. And of course, then I look at that from the perspective of someone who works a lot with fishing people. And I think if you ask, and there's a fisheries question in there, so fisheries health. So we don't really use fisheries health as a term in fisheries science because it's not very well defined. But also, I'm wondering, so if you ask this to people who are not engaged in fishing, they may have a relatively abstract concept of that. But if you deal with people who are involved in fishing, and that'll be a fair number in your sample, they probably will have their own sort of partly experience-based conception of how well that fishery is doing, what the fishing quality is, how the abundance of fish has changed. And I'm wondering whether if you then give them the score and say, well, hey, yeah, you're quite good, but you haven't quite got it. They may say, what do you know about this? I spend all the time on the water and so on. So I'm wondering whether, you may end up with people thinking, well, no, you're what your assumptions here are not right, or your science is not right. And it's probably, this is one of the areas where you might get that because you have people who have a lot of personal experience and they're in social networks that have certain opinions, and they may have really conflicting but somewhat grounded perceptions of what's going on. So I'm a little concerned that you may get people thinking, well, no, they're not right. Why am I getting this? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, we try to curb some of that a little bit in the responses that we give. And so for this particular item, so in the last 5 years, fisheries health in Tampa Bay overall has correct answer for our data is declined. And then we sort of have a little response here that says, although water quality has seen some improvement, the number and variety of small fish and invertebrates in Tampa Bay has decreased in recent years. In fact, 2022 was the first time in 15 years that overall fisheries health declined in all segments of Tampa Bay. This is likely due to a combination of factors, such as recent red tide events and the loss of essential habitats. So we do try to add some context to there. But it would be great if you want, send me an email and everyone else as well too. I know we probably need to wrap up soon. But yeah, anybody that wants to chat more about this, this is, still draft form. All of these ideas and where we can align with existing survey items and measures that are already out there. That would be great if we can align with them so that then we have consistent measures over time and other people can use the measures that we have and all this stuff. So yeah, Kai, if you want, send me an email and we can chat, about how we word this question and things like that. That would be great.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for the segue there, Blake. I am going to move us on to our second presenters. We have Dr. Jamie Lewitzo and Carolyn Barnett that will give an introduction to the Streaming Science podcast. And I can say that I've participated in this podcast before and speak very highly of it. So I'm very excited that they are here to share that with everyone.
Yes, thank you, Krista. That was like kind of a crazy time when you participated. It was like during COVID days and all the things I remember. So thank you so much for doing it. We appreciate you. I'm going to try to share my screen so that Caroline and I have some slides to walk through here. Thank you so much for having us. It is like exciting to meet with fellow social scientists and environmental scientists and people who are interested in outreach and engagement and all the really great things in Blake's survey when it came to eco-anxiety and social justice and environmental justice. We talk about that a lot in our graduate student group here around the Streaming Science project. And so it was really exciting to hear and see the survey being developed and then to be able to tell students like, look, this is what's really happening in communities where people are doing this type of research. I need to have you come talk to some of my classes, Blake. That'd be really great. Anyway, okay, so we're here today to talk to you a little bit about the Streaming Science Project. I'm an associate professor at the University of Florida in the Department of Agriculture, Education, and Communication. And I've been working in radio and television since like the late 90s and thought I would never go to graduate school and never do this sort of thing. Just thought I was going to work at TV stations my whole life. But then I realized those are long hours, not much pay, and being in the media is a dream, but also very tricky work. So I realized I liked working at universities and getting to go out with scientists and doing radio and television and video and things like that in other ways. So I was at Purdue University for graduate school, University of Nebraska-Lincoln as a faculty member for a little bit, and now down here at UF for about 6 years now. So I get to work with really great students like Caroline. Caroline, I think you should unmute if you're here and say hello to everyone as well.
Hi, everybody. My dog decided right now that he wanted to play with his squeaky toys, so if you hear anything, I'm sorry in advance. Um, but yes, I'm a graduate student of Dr. Lewitzo. I actually have the pleasure of doing both my master's thesis with her and now currently my PhD. Shows how much I like her. And these are some pictures of me working with streaming science on different electronic field trips. You can see which ones are COVID and which ones are not COVID. But overall, they were very enjoyable, and it was really great being able to work with stuff I love. I did my undergrad at UF in marine sciences, so a lot of the stuff that I am really passionate about and that I like to work on is focused on the marine and natural resource sector. So this particular electronic field trip was with the Nature Coast Biological Station, and we introduced stuff like the living shoreline and just general science communication with kids about ocean literacy and ocean science, which was pretty cool. But yeah, I'll go ahead. I'll talk later in the presentation, but sorry.
And Caroline may not tell you until a little later, but she did grow up in St. Pete and still returns to the Tampa Bay area quite regularly to see her family. And she is the one who has taught me all about Tampa Bay and taken me on some really great boat rides through that area. And I got to just learn a lot through her thesis that she's going to talk about in just a second. So okay, here's what we thought we would speak with you about today. We have a lot of slides because we love what we do, but we will skip through some and fly through some to keep it a little more condensed to the timeline today. But this is all in the meeting notes as well. So if you wanted to go through it more, you could. But today we just thought we would share with you a little bit about like our kind of science communication and engagement philosophy and perspective, and then just give you an overview of streaming science and what we do and how it works, and then some specific examples of some of our electronic field trips and virtual reality tours, because we think that could be a way that as you're developing grant projects or you're doing research with one another, we'd love to join you. We're usually the broader impacts people on most grants. We do K-12 outreach and engagement through a lot of what you'll see today, but we also work with adult learners through our podcasts or through our digital field experiences and other things as well. So science communication and engagement, what do we think that is and what do we think it means? We are big believers in this. We are big believers in just pushing information at people isn't working anymore. So that thing on the left, the deficit model, I really drive this home in our classes and in our research group that we actually want to be doing the dialogue model. So, you know, the National Academy of Sciences has this great research agenda that a lot of this comes out of. So I would say this is a big driver in what we're trying to do, not just push pretty content, which I do want my students to learn those skills to develop really great and beautiful content, but also ask people, what did you learn from that content and how has it impacted you? Or what do you need from us? And I feel like that survey we just saw is doing those wonderful things. So this is very exciting. We also are big believers in public engagement It has to get out of academic journals. It can't just kind of be the articles we write to ourselves and publish to ourselves. And you've maybe seen this model from AAAS. On the left is how we usually write our journal articles. That's what we have to do. Background literature, all those great things about our methods. And then we finally get to the results and the conclusions. The public's like, hey, we want to actually hear the results and the conclusions first, and then we want to know how you got to them. So we're trying to kind of follow that idea of the so what, who cares at the top of what we do, and then a bit more about how the science worked to then establish that credibility and that trust. So I love this one because we know, there's this sort of divide. We're always like, well, the scientists know this knowledge, the public knows this knowledge. And so that deficit model approach of, well, then fine, let me chase you down with my science and now get you to understand it. We know that doesn't work. So this one just always kind of cracks me up. So we also know that just because you push facts at people, it doesn't change their minds, it doesn't change their behaviors. So we're really trying to operate from this other idea of social connectivity and social engagement, and really understanding people's values and perspectives. And so a lot of these needs assessments you're doing, a lot of these actually just going out and speaking with people at a library, a grocery store, in the community to find out why they feel the way they do, at churches, right? All these things before we just start shoving information at people. So having more of this social approach to science communication and engagement is really important to us. All right, so that's all of our what we believe stuff. And so now I'm going to get to our what we do stuff. So here's what we do. We're mostly undergraduate and graduate classes in Ag and Natural Resource Communication at UF. I'm a big believer in project-based learning for learning how to do science communication and outreach, because if I just have students turn in papers and projects to me, who cares? So I think it's really important that they develop real world experiences and content and then turn it into sort of our streaming science platform, which started in 2016. I had a friend make the logo and the WordPress page for me, and it has turned into a whole thing that I never really thought it would be or do, because I think the science graduate and undergraduate students in the STEM majors and our social science and science communication students have really latched onto it and kept it thriving and growing because they see the need for this project-based approach to their learning and engagement, and then the public outreach component. So we do all these things, which is kind of unbelievable to me. I don't know how it's become all of this, but it's very exciting. We have 2 models for electronic field trips. We also develop podcasts, and we have some videos that we have created along the way. Photo essays are a big thing that I have students do to learn how to go out and interview scientists and social scientists and extension experts, and then write up those stories. So some of that journalism stuff, and then still include photos, and then make it all laid out and look nicely in different formats. We have our virtual reality tours, labs and landscapes, and then we're also doing some of these other blogs and research sparked condensed things as well. So these numbers aren't fully updated, I'll be honest, but these are close-ish to around what we're doing, maybe more than this now. Streamingscience.com, the analytics tells you all these people from all these places visit it. We have several electronic field trips we've done over the years. Students have created more than 100 photo essays and podcasts, and creating several videos and virtual reality tours as well that I have not counted all those now. I need to do a fresh count of these things, but they're just generating lots of content, but also lots of public engagement through the electronic field trips and the VR tours. And this is what our classes are like. We have undergraduate and graduate cross-listed courses through our department. They're very project focused. We kind of have the photo essay class with the photography and writing. We have the podcasting class, and then we have the electronic field trip class. And then around all of that, we have a research group that we call ourselves the Silent Digital Research Group. That was going to be the name of my startup company if I ever left academia, which I thought about at one point and still may not give up on someday. But that's what we call ourselves because we are very focused on All of this outreach and engagement and communication to increase science literacy, hopefully increase science decision making, hopefully increase ultimately attitude and behavior change. So that research group does a lot of research on all the stuff that we've generated. We have 2 electronic field trip models. The one on the left is when the whole class is involved. We usually have like 10 graduate students in that class every fall, and it operates much like a television show, but just off of iPads and the internet. It blows my mind. Like, I used to have to like sit in a control room and send a signal to satellite and then out to television and the whole thing. And now we're doing this on iPads and phones. And that is more of like we're doing today. Like, you'll have speakers and activities and students type in their questions and ask them. And then on the right is more of the Zoom call approach where they kind of actually stand up and unmute and ask the scientists questions. And it's a little more like one-on-one, one place to one place instead of one place to many, like on the left. Caroline, I think you're starting here maybe. I can't remember, just tell me.
I can.
Okay.
So from here on, these are some examples of titles of electronic field trips. We have a couple more than these, but we like to think of like fun little titles to when we do our social media pushes. They're kind of fun to design around. We did a Bats and Beyond where we had some of the bat scientists come and talk about their research at the UF bat houses. Conservation conversation. We had some forestry folks come out and talk about the forests area and forestry in general. And then the Buzz About Bees, which we went to the UF Honeybee Lab and we talked about some of the stuff going on with the entomology there. Because we're scientists at UF, we have a lot of resources and access to some of these cool science projects going on up in UF. But then later on with my thesis, we were able to do a type of virtual reality tour with Tampa Bay Estuary, which was cool. So it just shows that we can kind of move around wherever we are. And then the Scientist Online stuff was pretty much what she was saying on the 2 dynamics of different projects. And we did it more one-on-one with different scientists with water science and invasive plants. And then Restore the Shore was the Nature Coast Biological Station one. And so this is an example of our audiences and locations. So yeah, it's just pretty worldwide, which is incredible. And streaming science has had a really far reach into a lot of different places and people who are interested in this stuff. It's also why we like to say streaming science is bringing the science to you. It's bringing science to people who may not have access or may not be privileged enough to access some of these types of materials. And so we get to teach them about stuff from Florida that they may not have that access to. And the Silent Digital Research Group that Dr. Lewitza was talking about is this really cool group of students from both our major and also kind of outside the major a little bit. Anyone who really wants to work in a collaborative environment. So right now we have about 13 grad students, and you can see these numbers are some of the things that we've been able to accomplish by working together, which has been really great. We're even publishing an extension EDIS series on how to do some of these streaming science models and materials. I've personally got to work on the virtual reality and the electronic field trip series, which was nice. And then also, if anyone has an idea of something that they might want to research, you have this group of people behind you who may want to also work with you on that. And it's a really great support system for graduate students who might be unsure or are just starting in this academic kind of environment, but also in bringing more types of science information to other people. And so here are some more of the actual specific examples. I'll go into more detail. So the photo essays that Dr. Lewitza was talking about, we utilize Adobe Express, formerly Adobe Spark. And it's a really cool program that is free. There's both a free and a paid version, depending on what features you want, but the free version is available to anybody. And what it does is it actually gives you the opportunity to make pretty much a little, like a mini website that already has everything formatted for you, which makes it really easy for students from middle school to high school to learn how to use. And then you have this really great tool from different perspectives of people. And not only students, I mean, scientists can use this as well. And we also use Adobe InDesign where we make little one-pager leaflets on explaining some of this information, as you can see to the right, where we teach students how to kind of condense everything into a one-pager, which is a lot harder for a lot of people than you might think. But it's been really great on disseminating information when you have it in combination with these photo websites that people can scroll through with the pictures and really important bits of information. This is an example of one of them. This was actually the first project that I worked on when I was a master's student, and I got into my thesis stuff where we worked with the water science lab, and they talked about nutrient cycling and nutrients and stuff, and we ended up developing a project out of that on student responses to that because they were really obsessed with the 5-minute example on manatees out of a 45-minute nutrient cycling presentation, which was stellar. So that was what that project ended up becoming, but it was cool. And then Restore the Shore was the project where we worked with the Nature Coast Biological Station, the UF affiliate marine station out in Cedar Key, Florida, in the Nature Coast area, where we had students learn from different scientists, including to the right here, this Dr. Savannah Berry, the extension agent out there. And then so what we did was after we had these students participate and listen to these scientists and ask really engaging questions, we asked them what are the top 3 things that they learned from this tour, just point blank. And it was really great to see that we had the highest amount of living shoreline, which means that they did retain that new vocabulary term. And then shortly followed after is animals and fish, which is not very surprising, and then water. So what we did was actually something called arts-based research. Dr. Lewitzo didn't mention it in her other classes that she showed in her previous model, but she does also teach a class called arts-based research, which is a type of qualitative method. It's really cool, but basically it's taking research methods and turning it into a type of art as a way of showing your information. So instead of presenting information in numbers and graphs and types of things, you instead pick a creative outlet or arts-based outlet, such as narrative inquiry, drawing, photography, or even documentary series as how to present information to people who may receive this information better in a different way. So we had students draw what they learned, and you'll see that we have a really cool way of learning about things that they retained that they may not have written about, and that instead they drew. And so we then went in and deductively coded it. So we had different people go in and look through these pictures and really try to understand some of these drawings, and which is more fun than you would think. And we had everyone pick out different codes of, water, sand, vegetation, or was there a scientist? Oh, there's the building. And then we coded it based like that. And then overall, we saw that we did this thing called connected to water. So you were doing the connected to nature scale in your survey, and then the connectedness to water scale is something that we like to use a lot, derived from that connection to nature scale, created by Dr. Warner and Dr. Diaz up in UF. And it's basically asking similar stuff to the connected to nature, but it's water. I feel connected to the water around me, or I feel one with the water as a community. I feel part of the water cycle. And so we saw that overall they had a increase in their connection to water from before participating through after participating, which was cool. And then if you want to know more information about this particular one, it was published in the Applied Environmental Education and Communication Journal, and there's the stuff, and you can learn more about all that type of stuff there. Oh boy. So this was, I'm currently a PhD student, but this was my master's thesis. It ended up being a bit bigger than I thought it was going to be. But basically, I wanted to understand how the influence of charismatic animals impacts student knowledge. This was derived from that Water Around Us poster, because seriously, they gave a 5-minute example in the middle of this presentation about how manatee poop was part of the nutrient cycling, and these kids took it and ran. And so I wanted to learn about how much an animal might be too charismatic, or it might impact how much students retain from something. I actually was one of the recipients of your Bay mini grants, and that was really helpful for this. And it was pretty much the entire reason this was able to happen. So I'm very grateful. I'm now a proud member of the Tarpon Tag community, to give back a little bit when I can. But Yeah, so that was part of it. And what we did was we actually went around to the Tampa Bay area. And oh, sorry, I didn't mention too. This was actually just recently accepted for publication into the Journal of Environmental Education, which is super exciting. It hasn't exactly been published yet, but it's going to be very soon. So, yep, that'll be soon. But what I did was we did a 360-degree virtual reality tour. There's different levels and tiers of virtual reality. So this one was more of the 360. It's like taking a panorama and just stitching it together. And we were able to use the grant to purchase classroom sets of the Google Cardboard VR kits. So of all the teachers participating, each one was able to get a classroom set of about 20 VR headsets, which was really great for them and that they can use that as a resource in the future. And we had a blast email and we were able to get a lot of different people interested in participating. And we had students learn about what an estuary was pretty much. I did 3 copies of the tour, and the only differences between them was that one tour was like, hey, dolphins live in estuaries and dolphins are like, dolphins are cute. There's dolphins are cool. You know how hard it is to not say the word cute when that's really what you're trying to say the entire time. And then the second tour was using something that the sea squirt, the tuna kit. I love those things, but a lot of people don't really think they're as cute as dolphins, which is fair. And then the third one, I tried to not particularly talk about a specific species of animal. I just said, oh yeah, no, charismatic megafauna, that was keyword, that was everywhere, trust me. And yes, and so what happened was we had different schools participate in different virtual reality tours, and then to the top there, those were all the schools. We tried to do counties surrounding Tampa Bay. Some fell through or some didn't. We surprisingly didn't have any responses from Pinellas, which is really sad because I'm from Pinellas County. But other than that, we had 2 from Hillsborough and 1 from the other surrounding counties highlighted. And then if you want to go to the next slide. So what we ended up finding was a lot of really cool things. So I was originally trying to see if something could be almost too charismatic and that kids maybe like distracted from lesson content. And then what I ended up finding was that they were obsessed with the non-charismatic sea squirt because they thought it was interesting and weird and novel. We found that there was an increase in their connection to water before and after. And honestly, they just found that non-charismatic could really be charismatic. I think that there needs to be a rebrand of what is considered a charismatic megafauna or charismatic animal. And that's what this research ended up finding was that it didn't matter if it was charismatic, non-charismatic, or no animal at all. They still had an increase in their connection to water and an increase in their environmental literacy. I'm done now. Thank you.
You did great. I'm sorry, I did not mean to freak the slides out on you. I pushed my button. So anyway, I really wanted Caroline to talk a lot about her work, being from Tampa Bay and doing all of these different projects related to that area, but also related to water and connection to water. So Caroline, thank you so much for showing some of the work you're doing. And I think it's a great example of the work our graduate students can do with us through this research group and through this project, and how we can work with Tampa Bay or different organizations or universities to collaborate on all of this, because hopefully now we can start showing other types of animals in our messaging. It doesn't always have to be the stereotypical polar bears or dolphins or things like she's finding. I think that's important for science communication and engagement, to understand that our audiences are also just curious about things. If we wanted to just show them other things sometimes. Anyway, okay, I'm going to fly through some last slides very, very quickly so we can be done, so you can have discussion and things at the end. But we're getting a little fancier in our virtual reality. We have a USDA funded grant that we are partners with K-State and Texas Tech. It's called iVisit now. So if you ever wanted to look up the iVisit project, we're partnered with them, and we've created some virtual reality tours with some of our higher end VR cameras we've learned how to use over the past year or two. We have the Nature Coast Biological Station on there. We have the Center for Aquatic and Invasive Plants on there as a tour. And then there's also some Texas and K-State tours and things. So if you're looking to engage any students or audiences in other areas and communicate about them, you might check out our iVisit project. We're doing some place-based education research around that as well. This is some of what that looks like. We also did a hemp and kratom greenhouse in Apopka at our research center to see what students learn about alternative agriculture and things as well. And then we have the podcast series, as Krista mentioned. We have every spring, students go out and conduct interviews with all kinds of scientists and social scientists and extension experts. And we kind of usually have a theme that we try to focus on. And this was our water related one that year. This past spring, we've worked with the University of Guelph in Canada because I had a little bit of funding, and interviewed some of their scientists from up there because we don't have to travel to record audio. We can do it from anywhere with anyone. So we love to encourage our students to meet lots of people and explore lots of topics to develop those conversations. We've done a mini documentary project in the Everglades that was funded by NSF and the Let's Talk About Water program through Quasi, with our researchers working in the Everglades. And it's sort of focused on social responsibility, where I loved the survey today. I can't say it enough with the environmental justice and the community stuff, because we're starting to get into that with our mini documentary production, is asking and capturing stories of scientists like, well, why are you doing this? Right? Like, yes, they work on their science because they work on their science, but a lot of times they're doing it for the greater good, of course. And we know there's a lot of issues with trust and credibility and understanding of science. So we're really excited about this documentary project and some of the watch party stuff that we did around it, and some of the looking at how it can impact people's understandings and perception of social responsibility. We're starting to work in the future. We think we're not really in the future because it's here right now, so it's not the future anymore, but artificial intelligence. I'm trying to embrace it in my courses, because when it comes to communication, there's a million AI tools already out there. When it comes to visuals, when it comes to text, when it comes to audio, and we're starting to play around with those. The students created the logo on the left for our electronic field trip about strawberries. AI created the ones on the right. So we created the program on our own and without the use of AI for a whole semester. And then at the end of the semester, we put everything into AI to see what it would have done similar or different to what we did. And now we're kind of coming back through all of that and comparing and analyzing the differences in the messaging, the visuals, all that good stuff. We're using it for podcasting too. There's new tools that will create an avatar of your voice and make you sound like Siri. And so we're playing around with some of that stuff to see how that's going to impact what people believe or don't believe when it comes to different science messages. We're just here to say hi. Thank you for learning about us and chatting with us. We are open to suggestions at all times for our research projects or how we can work with you as well. And then also, we're really here to try to motivate people to make better informed science-based decisions through learning how to create these types of communication programs and projects. So thanks for having us. I think that was it. You can find us on all of our stuff, and please feel free to reach out to us anytime.
That was great. Thank you, guys. Blake is giving you the hand clapping for the great presentation. Does anybody have questions or comments about the presentation?
I
Hi,
can hop
Lara.
in.
Good to see you, Lara. I'm looking at my chat finally, but yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering, so I haven't done much work in American schools. I used to do a lot of work in Australian schools, but I assume the problems that we would frequently encounter are probably still relevant to American schools. But basically, I was just kind of wondering, at least in the Australian school system, a lot of the struggle that we had was finding capacity for classrooms to kind of go outside of their curriculum. And so if we wanted to sort of, bring scientists in or bring students out of the classroom and into the environment, we really sort of had to tailor all of our projects explicitly to the curriculum. And I was just kind of wondering, for the projects that you guys do, are they sort of built into the existing curriculum, or do you find that some teachers are still able to add in new stuff or do alternative things? What are your experiences there?
So this is a great question, conversation, and it is still hard to get into schools here because they're teaching for testing, and there's a testing schedule, and there's the adoption curve too of teachers who have taught for a really long time, and they're like, yes, I'm flexible with how I'm doing it. Come on in this week or this day, or teachers who are like brand new and not have to be very controlled about their schedule and not as flexible to let you in. So there's a lot of factors happening. We do in classes learn how to look up the next generation science education standards, learn how to look up the Florida science education standards, and identify the standards that match the content we're going to cover. And we think that helps us get into schools if we can show them how we're matching what they're teaching. We always know the nature of science is an objective across most grade levels. So just showing them how science works, and, still that scientific method, and now called scientific inquiry. And then also careers. Teachers are very interested in introducing students to careers and pathways. Caroline, there was something you were going to say as well. I don't want to cut you
Oh
off.
no,
Sorry.
just the science standards. It's made it really easy to just give that as like the top page before they look at anything else. Say, hey, this is gonna match all these things, and then they're pretty amenable after that. So
And I would say because of some of that challenge, we have started to work a bit more with homeschools or other schools that are more flexible, like Montessori type schools, or after school programs, because a lot of the schools will have an after school program that kids are kind of sitting in for a couple hours till their parents pick them up for different boys and girls clubs. We have another USDA grant where we started a 4-H virtual club that is statewide now. And so it's really great because then we can get students in Tampa, Miami, Jacksonville, like more urban areas as well, who maybe don't get to go physically to 4-H, but they can log on at home and join the club. And so it's the educational system and getting in is a little bit messy right now, but we're trying our best, and we do have some good teacher connections, but we're always trying to grow those as well.
I know one more that some of the extension agents have been able to use is like there's a STEAM night. That's one of the events that a lot of the Title I coordinators put together at Title I schools. So if the virtual field trips are set up such that you could have a table at an event like that to go on a virtual field trip with a crowd that's sort of moving around, that could be another way in.
Yeah, I also recommend like connecting with the Florida Association of Science Teachers and going to their conference, like either as an exhibitor, just to say hi and really introduce yourself and get to know more teachers, or have a session where you can present and show them what you're doing. Sometimes that has helped us, have a bit more adoption in schools.
Jamie, I work with a lot of teachers too, and some feedback we've gotten with our podcast is basically in order for them to use any of this like supplemental material, they need to have like a physical worksheet to go with it too. So there's some secrets that you wouldn't know unless you're talking to the teachers. And I know anyway, Jamie and I have collaborated on some stuff, but it is a struggle because they're just, they're so limited, but we're doing our best.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I have Caroline right now. We have a NOAA Be Wet project with the Cedar Key Station. And so Caroline's spending her summer getting some teacher materials ready where she's creating a guide, like a printed guide for them to explain how to like implement it in their classroom, and a video to go with it to just also like speak to them. But we've learned they prefer asynchronous stuff, and they prefer it in a lot of formats because you can't please everyone. Some people want print, some people want video, some people want audio. So we just kind of throw all of it at them as like a big a la carte to see who uses what and what they need, because yeah, I think they need all that extra support as much as possible. They have a lot going on. Yes.
Great, so I'm going to move us on to our final presentation to make sure we have time for a short discussion after the presentations are finished. So our final presentation will be a research spotlight from Dr. Rebecca Zarger at the University of South Florida. And she will discuss recent and ongoing work for the Blue-Green Algae Project, and I will let her introduce the project and the project team.
Great, thank you. And I'll share screen here, just 1 second.
You can see the slides, but you're on mute.
Great, thank you, excellent. These have been some great presentations. I'm so excited about the survey that you're developing, Blake. It overlaps with a lot of work that I and my students have done. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes out of that, and really enjoyed hearing about the science literacy podcast, digital storytelling. I think you're going to see that what I'm going to talk about overlaps quite a lot in some kind of interesting ways with what we've heard about so far. So I know many of you I haven't met before. My name is Becky Zarger, and I'm a cultural anthropologist, environmental anthropologist at the University of South Florida. And what I'm going to be talking with you all today about is it's a very complex project involving a lot of moving parts. So I'm going to do my best to kind of hone in on the social science component of this project, while also giving you a sense of kind of the overall effort. As you'll see, the Tampa Bay Estuary Program is also a partner on this project. So I'm looking forward to, interjections or anything that folks, Blake and Maya and others might want to add in. But I'll just jump right in here. One of the things that we're especially interested in on this project is the experience of water pollution from nitrogen in what are often called frontline communities or under-resourced communities. And in today's talk, I'm going to give you a sense of how that has influenced the kind of the approach and the way this project Blue-Green Action Platform has evolved and changed over time. The overall goal of the project is to bring community voices in and create dialogue and also educational materials, digital resources, share up-to-the-minute data on nitrogen pollution. And, so we're doing that with a very broad interdisciplinary team. And I've got a picture of our team in just a moment that I'll show. But this is kind of our mission statement that we developed after many iterations with the Blue Gap team. As you can see, it involves the University of Iowa, Stetson Law School, an organization that's phenomenal called Black and Marine Science, as well as folks at USF. And as I mentioned, we're really interested in doing what we call linking stories and data to action. As it turns out, that's a lot harder than you might think. But let me tell you a little bit more about the team. Sorry, my PowerPoint is giving me the pinwheel of death. Okay, this is our team. Sorry, folks. Here we go. Here's our team. So the team involves not only anthropologists and social scientists, but also folks who are involved in law and policy, marine science, environmental humanities, and really everything in between. So we have been working together for 2+ years on this project. And I think it's important to note that it's funded through a very kind of specific NSF program that's called a Convergence Accelerator, which has the aim of bringing scientific insights, but also findings and things like developing apps or other solutions for environmental problems to the public. So one of the things about this project is that throughout we've been engaged in the process of thinking through how this can be brought to the public and then sustained on its own in a nonprofit form. So that's been a really exciting opportunity, but it's also brought a lot of challenges, I think, with this kind of timing of activities and the scoping with such a large interdisciplinary team. So for those on the call today, this is probably not such surprising news, but we've presented this research to a lot of different audiences. And I think one thing that we've learned through a lot of our social science research on this project is that, you know, not everyone knows the problem of nitrogen pollution per se. People are sometimes familiar with it, but more often than not as much. The impacts of nitrogen pollution on our waterways are much more visible and kind of a part of people's everyday experiences. So these are some probably familiar photos from one of the red tide blooms in our local waters. And I think we're all kind of aware of the impact of that in a variety of ways. This was a photo from March that was after Army Corps began releasing Lake O waters into our estuaries. This was just a very kind of dramatic visual image of the meeting of more polluted waters with those that are less so. So I mentioned that Blue Gap is this very large interdisciplinary team that includes both academics, environmental organizations, and education and outreach actors, legal experts. And we have 3 different watersheds that we're working in. You can see those here, Mississippi River, Tampa Bay, and Salt River in St. Croix in the US Virgin Islands. And these are all different scales. I'm going to focus primarily on Tampa Bay today with some of the quotes and the information that I'm going to share just because of the focus of this group. This is an example of one of the informational infographics that was developed by our project team to give a little more information about sort of the good and bad of nitrogen in our waterways. And I think it's safe to say that the causes and the solutions of this problem are very complex. But the social science comes in and my collaborators on the team, this is very much a team effort. We've been really interested in how stories of everyday experiences of nitrogen pollution can not only inform policy and thinking about what kind of policy action steps might need to be taken, but would it potentially inspire collaboration across watersheds and within watersheds. And I think we've seen that through, you know, I guess a lot of sort of iterations of what we're doing with this project that has happened. I think we've also got a long way to go, but we're making a lot of progress. So thinking about bringing the stories and the data together is something that our project has been working on all along. We had an initial phase 1 funding for this project, which was fairly exploratory on the social science side of things. And what came out of that initial funding from NSF, which was only for a year, was that really understanding those stories and sort of humanizing nitrogen pollution was a phrase that our team came up with, was where the team wanted to go with the phase 2 funding, which we did receive. So you see on your screen, you know, some key themes that came out of initial interviews with local activists, water managers, people involved in policy, elected officials who are concerned about nitrogen pollution in watersheds. And this quote that you see on the screen, I think captures one of the ways that stories and storytelling has potential to impact policy. And this came from one of our interviewees sharing that they had been in touch often with state legislators, for example, EPA, USDA, and others, trying to share firsthand what was going on the ground. This interviewee is in Iowa, and references that the goal is to really keep pollution out of the rivers before it ever even gets there. As we know, that's easier said than done. And one of the other things that came out of this initial phase of research was there's a lot of data, but bringing that to the public in a relatable and accessible and also engaging way is something that we thought was a good priority to focus efforts on, as far as the social science and the education components of the project, as well as digital content creation. This is just a screenshot of a draft version of a information system that part of our team, particularly Dave Courtney, who's at University of Iowa, and his team has been working on to provide links between up to the minute data about watersheds, as well as some of the stories that we're hearing from folks who have shared their stories with us. And then linking that to ways to create solutions together. So I mentioned that connecting the stories to the data has been challenging in some ways. I think one of the most exciting parts about this project for me personally, and I think for my students, has been that the project has really changed a lot over the course of where we started and where we've ended up. And I think that's really reflected the priorities of the community participants, who we refer to initially as nitrogen champions, and then now more often as storytellers, who are folks living in a neighborhood and taking action about what's happening with their local pond or the river that they visit to fish in, or on a broader scale, state level or even national level politics. So hearing from those individuals what they saw as not only priority issues to focus on, but what were the best ways to connect with their community through a variety of digital formats, really became the focus of the project. So this image here is from a site visit of our team to the 22nd Street garden that's in East Tampa. So we have a very diverse team that's really spread across a lot of geographies. We've had a few opportunities to bring the team together in-person workshops and field site visits, but we've also done a lot of online Zoom calls to try to sort some of these things out. And systems modeling was one of the tools that we used. And then one of the other key pieces, as I mentioned, was to sort of understand, document, and support the work, the community engaged work that our nitrogen champions or storytellers were already engaged in, and to find ways to create spaces and amplify what was already being done. That is truly amazing work. So that's been, I think, very humbling, and it's been an honor for me to participate in a piece of the process and people sharing some of those stories. So one of the things that's kind of interesting about this project is that we have a lot of different types of storytelling, and I think the presentation by Jamie and about your team at UF was really exciting to hear about all the variety of products that you all are creating, and we've been engaged in some, I think, parallel work that I'll talk about in just a minute. But we had a kind of stepwise process where we first reached out to people who were actively engaged in nitrogen, water pollution spaces, and did one-on-one interviews with them in a kind of research interview mode. So these were covered under IRB. They are anonymous. And they really served as kind of a springboard or a foundation for some of the other storytelling formats that emerged after. So a part of our team is Disa Philadelphia, who is a very well-known media figure and has a lot of insights and expertise around interviewing, specifically on camera, video stories kind of interviewing. And so she was able to access our research interview transcripts and transform those into questions that really targeted specific themes that could then be highlighted in studio and in the field interviewing to create short videos, documentary films, and other products. So I just want to recap a few themes because this is the social science group. I think some of that may be of interest. And then towards the end, I'll share a little bit more about all the different types of digital storytelling that we've been working on. So here's what we learned about humanizing nitrogen pollution. One of the things that we focus on, obviously, is bringing voices of folks whose voices are not often heard around this issue. And I think a key element of that has been, as you see in this image here, thinking really carefully and strategically about representation in multiple different ways. So representation and inclusivity in our team and the kinds of questions we ask and how we go about doing the research and the kinds of events that we are organizing to share the work and the stories. This image was developed by Dr. MacArthur at University of South Florida and his team, and is part of the trailer for Blue Gap video stories that are being shared on YouTube and will appear on our information system platform too. So I wanted to kind of hone in on one theme that really started with early conversations and research interviews, and then just was taken up and really expanded in very exciting ways by one of our alliance members, Hilary Van Dyke. These quotes are not from her, but she really championed this focus on the connection between human health and well-being, access to water-based recreation, and the water pollution that we experience in the Tampa Bay area. So this was kind of like the seeds of that, in many ways, that conversation that Hilary then took and created this phenomenal documentary film with partners at Tampa Bay Estuary Program and folks at USF too. So one of the themes that really emerged out of our initial interviews around nitrogen pollution was a concern about water quality and particularly drinking water. The quote at the top kind of captures that. The idea that many of our interviewees, particularly those in frontline or under resource communities, buy bottled water because they don't trust public water sources. This is something we heard over and over and over again. Whether or not people were aware of nitrogen pollution or not, this was really an everyday reality. So over time, as we kind of moved into the second phase of our project, we started to make more connections with our interviewees around the idea of safety of water and recreational water use. And so this conversation, which is between Brittany Davis, who's a postdoc on our project, and one interviewee, Brittany asks, have you heard anyone mention nitrogen pollution before? And our interviewee mentioned, no, I don't think so. This was really common with our conversation. So this presented some challenges kind of methodologically and for our project overall, but we decided that to kind of address the main focus of a lot of the natural and ecological science components of the project, we really needed to hear more about those connections between different types of pollution and experience in local water. And so we often kind of provided a definition of nitrogen and how it shows up, in this case, in the Tampa Bay area. So after that explanation, then the interviewee says, oh, well, you know, we are living in Florida, there's water everywhere. So obviously that's important. And then she shared with us that her husband takes their 2 daughters fishing on Saturday morning, and that, you know, water pollution is definitely something that is of concern and interest. She also shared in the same interview that, you know, being in water is so different than being on land. You know, it's like just your body feels lighter. And then she talked about generational differences in access to water, swim lessons, and being able to, you know, kind of take advantage and enjoy that peaceful feeling of being on the water and below the water through swimming and diving, as being a key part of their everyday experiences. So in this one quote, it kind of represents a lot of these connections that are being made in some of the digital content that we created. So let me, I'm going to go through the next few slides really quickly because there's a lot of details, but it kind of gives a sense of some of the other key themes from our interviews. Probably not surprisingly, lack of trust in infrastructure and the data that's really available, and with those who are making critical decisions that affect our health. That was a common theme that came up. Initially, we got a lot of interest in the idea of accessing more kind of localized, up to the minute, contextualized data, and thinking about how those data could be used. Probably not surprisingly, the importance of power relationships and politics. This quote is from Iowa, but I think there are many, many examples of stories that were shared with us about both frustration, but also ways action was being taken around addressing, improving water quality in our area. And so all of these themes, which this kind of scratches the surface of a lot of the analysis that we're doing that's still ongoing, really influenced this idea of how do we bring these stories, this data to the public. So I mentioned Hilary Van Dyke, who you see on the screen here, and this is something that she shared with us, that she really focused her work as an Alliance member on this idea of inclusion in Tampa's recreation and waterways. And as she says, when you open access to them, you're really going to help open access to all sorts of communities and to lots of dialogue around some of the environmental challenges beyond nitrogen pollution even that we face. These are some images from the studio that are really just kind of, I think, capture the people, the faces of those who are spending a lot of time in waterways in our environment, and who also are really passionate about this issue from lots of different angles. So I've mentioned swimming and recreation, but thinking about more sustainable agricultural practices, especially on a small scale, where we get our food and how our food system is configured. These are some of the other topics that came up too. So one of our other Alliance members, Lena Young Green, who is a community leader and activist, force of nature from Tampa Heights, shared with us her kind of philosophy about connecting stories with action, which is something I think that she really lives every day. But thinking about not being afraid to speak out, go to city council, ask questions, talk to Florida Department of Transportation and others that may have an influence on your community. Dominique Cobb is another Alliance member who has shared a lot of information about the way she grows organically and really tries to share that wisdom and expertise with others in her neighborhood. And she shared her story with us too. So one of the ways that both the storytellers and members of our team came up with to bring stories like these to the public are through community events, which kind of brings a lot of this information together for the public. And the first one I'll highlight is an event that was held in Iowa, which was a really interesting one that came out of a collaboration with humanities and writing professor at the University of Iowa, and students who were on a fellowship in the summer of 2023. And they did a lot of similar kinds of like in the field work to what was described in with our second speaker team. They did not develop a podcast, but they did a lot of journalistic interviewing of folks working on this topic in Iowa. And they created this really interesting combination of different media that included ceramics, paper making, dance choreography, and story maps, as well as drone photography. So there was, that represented all the different student projects that were a part of this. And I think they had a really successful event. And we did, some surveys there to kind of capture the experience that people had at that event and what they took away. And I just want to give a shout out to Blake Simmons, who was heavily involved in developing that, as well as Brittany Davis. One of the other things that we've been doing, or that I guess took place in fall of 2023, was a class that I teach at USF called Florida Waterscapes, which was a group of, 10 or 12 graduate students at USF from civil and environmental engineering, from biology, from anthropology, and we all worked on this topic of nitrogen pollution and understanding stories in our local region that focus on some of the topics that you see here listed on the slide. For example, experiences of water pollution for fishers around the Tampa Bay area, and a story map was developed on that, which I think there's some folks on this call who do that work, which was very foundational for the students. So if you're interested in following up more on that, Nicole, I would love to do that. We also had a student working on experiences of living shorelines and inequity and stormwater ponds in neighborhoods that are former red line neighborhoods that are now kind of re-envisioning the role of stormwater ponds in their communities. We also took a toxic bus tour with Alliance member Walter Smith, who you see here, who was also in the process of being interviewed for a documentary film. So to wrap up, I want to highlight a couple of the other digital content elements that were created for the project. One is this amazing film, A Splash of Color, that Hilary Van Dyke, who I mentioned a few times in the presentation, is the visionary behind the film. A lot of the folks you see on the left are interviewed in it. And one of the quotes that you see here is a takeaway of someone who attended an opening event that was organized also by Maya Burke and Tampa Bay Estuary Program and other partners on January 6th of this year. And it was a really powerful event where we heard a lot about discussions of really having dialogue around the history of exclusion from water spaces for Black community members, and how this is a way of really moving beyond that and encouraging different ways to access those spaces through things like swimming and diving. So if you haven't had an opportunity to attend one of those events, I highly recommend it. Really amazing. Just briefly, we have a couple of other education and outreach efforts going on. One are short informational videos that are also really engaging and intended to be shared on social media around nitrogen pollution, that are largely produced by an organization called Black and Marine Science. Dr. Tiara Moore is the CEO of that. And she, along with collaborators at the University of Rhode Island, are also have been putting together a documentary called Harm in the Water that highlights in particular experiences in the Mississippi River watershed, but also in other locations, coastal locations as well. And really also kind of emphasizes this connection between histories of injustice and access to clean water in a variety of different ways and how it touches our lives. So that documentary is, I believe, scheduled to be released to the public sometime in September. So stay tuned for that. That'll be really an exciting culmination of this project. So going forward, we're imagining some future audiences for this work. And as I mentioned, one of the goals of this support from the National Science Foundation is for the Blue Gap organization to morph from an academic grant research-based entity into a nonprofit. And we're engaging in that, I think, very challenging process of thinking through how that is going to work, what that's going to look like. There's been a lot of thought and strategizing about that. These are some on the left of the screen. You can see some of the organizations and entities that we see as kind of future audiences and partners, but also potential clients for consulting and especially emphasizing successful community events that really draw in a more inclusive audience. And so thinking about the best ways to do that are ongoing conversations. Last thing I want to say is that I mentioned that this is a really big team, and I think as a social scientist involved in the team and speaking to the current group that's on this call, it's useful, I think, to be a little bit self-critical and reflexive about the role of social science in a project like this. I have a lot more to say about this than I have time for, but these are some kind of key takeaways that I would like to share. And one is that, a human-centered design approach, which is kind of the buzzword that NSF uses for this type of work, means a lot of different things to a lot of people, including members of our team. I think one of the challenges that we have navigated, and I think, oftentimes successfully, but sometimes, there's been some challenges and road bumps along the way is, for example, how do you integrate ethnographic work that's covered by IRB and anonymous with digital storytelling in a very visible way that, I kind of talked about both on the presentation today. And so I think that's a challenge for social scientists to kind of think through in this sort of storytelling realm of how we present stories. How can we best and most ethically represent those stories in an online platform or on social media? And thinking about how the project will potentially get picked up, or the interactions that might take place between community members. I think there's a lot of potential, and we're kind of working on the actualization of that. But most importantly, I think one of the messages from this project is that when you approach this work from a co-design standpoint, your point A and your point B might look really different. And I think that's actually become a strength of this project. So I'm looking forward to seeing, in the end, all the different kinds of products that we have and the ways we're telling and sharing this story about nitrogen pollution. So thank you. I'll end there. And I don't know if there's time for questions or not, but thanks for the time.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. We do have a couple minutes for questions. I didn't see any come in the chat box while you were presenting, but if anyone would like to raise their hand or unmute and ask some questions. I just want to commend you. I have a project team of about 12 on one project that I lead now, and seeing 45 people on a project team makes my head explode a little bit trying to coordinate everybody. So kudos to you all for producing so much with a team that large.
Thanks, Krista. I think that's pretty much every Zoom call we have. Someone's head explodes.
Yeah.
Including I'll just say, speak for myself, including my own often. But yeah, I mean, I think coordination and integration is it's an ongoing challenge with this type of work, and I think it's important to talk about that in a space like this, because this is also really a trend on whether it's NSF funding or EPA funding or other work that's being done in these spaces. There's a lot of push towards large interdisciplinary teams collaborating to address the sort of quote unquote wicked problems that we're confronting. And I don't think that those challenges are really taken seriously by funders at the moment. I think, I mean, there's acknowledgement and recognition that they exist, but I think figuring out ways to navigate that are kind of emerging and ongoing. So I'm also a part of several other projects that are similarly, constructed with big interdisciplinary teams. So I would say there's probably an emerging science of team science, which I know is out there, that these projects would be just wonderful to analyze in that sense.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, and also recognizing that we sometimes need space and time in the budget to start communication with a team that large. You get 6 months in and realize you're on different pages, and then maybe only have a 1 or 2 year project. It's really hard sometimes, but it sounds like you guys are making progress.
Thanks. I don't know, Blake or Maya, or I think Heather is on the call too. And if you all have anything to add or comments. Not putting you on the spot, just providing an open space. I covered it. Okay, there's a lot of detail in my slide.
I can add one little thing, just winking my eye, that in team science, it's very encouraged to have a project manager to help bring everyone together. I think that's one of the main things that I got out of our team science training, is when you converge and you collaborate and you bring all different fields especially from different parts of the world, accountability and organization and all that. We all may have those skills, but to actually bring it all together, it is really important. I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm just saying it is really important to have 1, 2, or 3 people that are helping to organize it all, because team leads need to do the actual, mindful work, and not that a project manager doesn't either. But anyway, just wanted to put that out there in this collaboration kind of point.
Thanks, Heather. Sherilyn, I just saw that you're on the call too, so I'm gonna give you a shout out for Sherilyn Jones is our doctoral student in anthropology at USF, who has been very involved with a lot of the interviewing and qualitative data analysis, and has been instrumental to the success of the project. So no pressure to say anything, but shout out is definitely warranted there. So thanks for joining us. I do think there's a lot in the works, so stay tuned for other things coming from this project. While I've got the microphone, I just wanted to say, Jamie, I will be reaching out to you, because I've also done some very, I guess, kind of exploratory podcasting with one of my classes on a different project that involves urban trees and equity. And so seeing the work you do is just fantastic to see how you're putting that together, and how you all are bringing the science out in different ways. So thanks for that.
This was a great job today, Blake, with these 3 together back to back like this, because I was thinking the same as you were speaking, Rebecca, about amazing how you're using storytelling and data and and doing it all. It's like your whole model about storytelling data to action is exactly what we need to be doing. And this is an amazing project. So thank you for letting me listen into this as well. So I'm sure we can talk about lots of things.
Sounds great. And it's definitely a very large we on this project, just to reiterate. Yeah.
Great. I think we are relatively out of time. And I remember that I forgot to introduce myself at the beginning, and maybe not everyone knows me. So I'm Dr. Krista Court. I am an assistant professor in the Food and Resource Economics Department at the University of Florida, and the co-chair, one of the co-chairs of this subcommittee. So you can always email me or Blake for any additional feedback that you want to get to the presenters if you can't find their contact information yourself. And Blake, if you want to let people know, I think it would be best if we send out a survey, but at least let them know what's coming.
Yeah, so just in the last couple of minutes that we have here, so we've now had 3 meetings over this past year. And so, our meetings so far have kind of taken the form of this seminar series. We wanted to make sure that, everyone has an opportunity to sort of share who they are and what they do, and, help us build this network of, social scientists and communicators and change makers and all sorts of people that are interested in these human dimensions of conservation. And so kind of wanted to get an idea from you all about, what you would like to see at future meetings. We can continue this sort of seminar series type of format and continue to share our work and our interests. But also if people would be interested in hosting things like workshops around a particular issue or technique, or like training events. Maybe you have a really cool tool, or if you want to teach, how to do a podcast, or, those types of things, if that would be of interest to you. Things like collective problem solving. So if we all have a shared interest in a particular behavior or issue or some kind of problem that we think, putting a bunch of minds together in a room for 2 hours could help us tackle. That's something we could do. Field trips. These are things that we typically have for our other sort of groups that, go to natural places or get to see living shoreline installations. So we can have some of those kind of more nature-based field trips, but also like if you've got a lab or a center or something, and you'd be happy to sort of give folks a tour to kind of see all the stuff that you might have, that's another thing we could do too. And yeah, kind of as we mentioned, we actually lucked out in all of the presentations today, kind of having this umbrella theme of community. And I thought, oh, that might be a good idea to sort of have more thematic types of meetings for folks. So think about, if you would be interested in structuring these around more specific themes or topics. I just listed a couple broad ones here that I think might apply or be of interest to a lot of folks, but be thinking about, if there were some themes or topics that you might be interested in. After this meeting, I'll send around a survey. It's not as long as the survey I sent you today. It'll take, probably just a couple of minutes. But yeah, I would just like to get your feedback on what types of meetings you'd be interested in, what themes or topics you'd like to explore, and where you think you might be able to contribute to future meetings in each of those different things. But yeah, so feel free to stick around if you want to hang out. We can discuss this more. But thank you all for coming. Thanks again to all of our speakers, Becky, Jamie, Caroline, and thanks, of course, to Krista for facilitating. And I look forward to seeing you all in September for our next meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thanks.